Lindsey Graham's recent breakdown on national television has revealed something we've long suspected. Beneath the political theater lies a deeply unstable figure whose entire worldview revolves around military intervention and unchecked executive power for years. Graham has embodied everything wrong with warmongering politicians, individuals so consumed by insecurity and the need for relevance that they find comfort only in the machinery of war. Today, we're witnessing the complete unraveling of a senator caught between his desperate loyalty to Donald Trump and the growing rebellion within his own party. What triggered this public meltdown? Trump's increasingly authoritarian threats against Republican senators who dare to vote with their conscience. Let's break down exactly what's happening and why it matters for American democracy.
If I can get you on Greenland, you said this week you'll do everything to stop any kind of military takeover of Greenland. The White House said that was not off the table. But do you actually think he would use military force, or are we overreacting to that?
I would hope not. But let's say you wanted to buy Greenland, and I'm not disputing that that might be something we might want, to buy Greenland. You don't get there by angering and denigrating the people who live there and saying, we're going to march the Marines in and take it if you don't sell it to us. It doesn't make them very willing sellers. So really, if your goal is somehow we're going to rattle the saber and then they're going to sell it to us, I think it's having the opposite effect. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone in Greenland for it, but you'd also be hard-pressed to find somebody in Washington who's for a military invasion on either side of the aisle. So I think there'll be enough pressure to stop it. But the problem is they keep rattling the saber. They keep saying, we're going to do this. We keep this in our armamentarium that we will, reserve the right to invade Greenland. And that gets back to the War Powers Act. That's why this debate's so important, because it's not just about Venezuela. It's about Venezuela. It's about Greenland. It's about Colombia. It's about Cuba. It's about whether or not the people get a say in whether we go to war.
Okay.
Rand Paul just said something that actually makes sense, and that's concerning, because agreeing with Paul isn't something anyone should have to do regularly. But here's the reality, he's absolutely correct. Donald Trump doesn't engage in actual diplomacy. The only negotiations Trump understands are those that end with personal enrichment, like that $400 million Saudi jet deal. Trump's idea of international relations involves threatening sovereign nations, accepting lavish gifts from authoritarian regimes, and then cutting deals that actively harm American workers. The evidence speaks for itself. Over the past year alone, the United States has lost 65,000 manufacturing jobs, a direct consequence of Trump's reckless tariff policies and so-called diplomatic victories that never actually materialize. Paul raises a crucial point about Greenland. There's zero strategic logic in simultaneously threatening military invasion while attempting to purchase territory. Republicans love discussing territorial advantages when it serves their narrative, particularly regarding Russia. Yet they conveniently ignore Ukraine, a nation directly bordering Russian territory and already aligned with Western interests. The Greenland obsession has nothing to do with legitimate national security concerns or foreign policy strategy. This is purely about Trump's authoritarian ambitions, expanding power for power's sake. And his vice president, J.D. Vance, shares this dangerous vision.
Than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things.
Listen carefully to what Vance just admitted. He openly declared the War Powers Act, a constitutional check on executive military authority, as fundamentally fake and unconstitutional. This isn't political posturing. This is a direct assault on the separation of powers. Here's what they're actually doing. Trump and Vance want to strip all legislative oversight from military decisions, consolidating absolute war-making authority in the executive branch. They're attempting to eliminate any congressional check on their power, but here's what they fail to understand: this creates a dangerous precedent that cuts both ways. When Democrats eventually return to power, and they will, these expanded executive authorities won't simply disappear. Republicans are building the very authoritarian framework they'll one day find themselves subjected to. However, Trump knows his power grab only works if Republican senators continue falling in line. That's why he posted a threatening message on Truth Social that sent shockwaves through the Capitol and triggered Lindsey Graham's very public breakdown. Trump's post was clear and menacing. Republican senators who voted with Democrats to preserve war powers should be ashamed for attempting to restrict the president's ability to fight and defend America. He listed those senators by name and declared they should never hold office again. This threat targeted senators like Josh Hawley, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. And while Trump's recent threats have largely fallen flat, he believes this intimidation campaign will work, but Trump isn't alone in threatening his Republican colleagues.
The Powers Act was passed in 1973 by a bunch of liberal Democrats. It's a power grab by the Congress against the commander-in-chief. Every president since 1973 has rejected the idea that Congress can substitute our judgment for theirs. So what these five are good friends. They're creating a situation where you have 535 commander-in-chiefs, not one. There's never been a court case in the history of the country where a military operation was terminated by the Supreme Court because Congress didn't approve. There have been 130 military operations by the commander-in-chief without congressional approval. So here's my point. You're creating a disaster for the country. If a member of Congress doesn't like what the president's doing as commander-in-chief militarily, cut off funding for that operation. We have power of the purse. You can do that. If you think the president doing something illegally, you can impeach him. But we can't have a situation where Congress becomes commander-in-chief. That would be a disaster. This is an unconstitutional power grab. To my colleagues, you're doing a lot of damage. You're emboldening our enemies. You're restricting President Trump. Unconstitutionally sound, doing a lot of damage. Stop it.
Senator, over the weekend, you tweeted about
Can I add one thing, one last thing?
Yes.
I've been a military lawyer for 33 years. I was a judge, advocate in the Air Force. I was a prosecutor, defense attorney, military judge. I feel comfortable talking about this. What you're doing is wrong. Go ahead.
Senator.
What you just witnessed was a complete emotional breakdown disguised as constitutional analysis. Lindsey Graham, a sitting United States Senator, just argued that Congress, the legislative body he serves, should have zero authority over military decisions. Let's address his claims directly. First, Graham calls the War Powers Act a power grab by liberal Democrats from 1973. He conveniently ignores the historical context. The War Powers Act was passed during the Vietnam War, a catastrophic conflict that cost nearly 60,000 American lives based on executive deception and unchecked military escalation. Graham wants us to forget that history. He wants us to ignore why Congress felt compelled to reassert its constitutional authority over war-making decisions. The answer is simple: to prevent future presidents from unilaterally dragging America into disastrous, endless conflicts without public consent. His argument that every president has rejected this law proves nothing except that executives consistently seek unlimited power. That's precisely why checks and balances exist. Graham also posted something particularly revealing on social media, warning Cuban leadership to contact Maduro, suggesting they'd better comply or face Trump's military wrath. He literally told them to find a new place to live. Think about the staggering hypocrisy here. Graham condemns Cuba's oppressive government while simultaneously championing Trump, a president currently deploying armed immigration enforcement, conducting door-to-door raids, forcibly removing people from homes and vehicles, with documented cases of violence and even deaths. So Graham's message is essentially, stop being a dictator, or we'll show you real dictatorship. Stop oppressing your people, or Trump will bypass Congress, the Constitution, and international law to oppress your people differently? This is the same logic that has destroyed American credibility worldwide and cost trillions of dollars in failed military interventions. Graham claims his military legal background gives him authority on this issue. 33 years as a military lawyer, he says. Yet somehow, those decades of experience led him to conclude that congressional war oversight, explicitly established in the Constitution, is illegitimate. The founders established congressional war powers for exactly this reason: to prevent wannabe strongmen and their sycophantic enablers from launching military adventures without public accountability. And let's be honest about who Lindsey Graham really is. This is a profoundly empty individual whose entire sense of self-worth derives from proximity to power, any power, regardless of principle. Remember when Trump needed Graham's vote on that massive legislative package? How did Trump secure his support? According to reports, they were golfing, and Trump literally told Graham to pick something from the pro shop at a Trump golf course. That's what it took. Free merchandise from a gift shop. This is the same Lindsey Graham who gets booed mercilessly at MAGA rallies whenever he appears alongside Trump. Even Trump's own supporters despise him. Yet Graham continues degrading himself, trading away congressional authority for presidential scraps, a pat on the head, a free hat, maybe another round of golf. Recent update: just this week, tensions escalated further as Trump publicly attacked additional Republican senators who've shown even minimal independence on foreign policy votes. The White House continues doubling down on claims that presidential war powers are essentially unlimited, setting up a constitutional crisis that could redefine executive authority for generations. Graham represents the absolute worst of American politics: unprincipled, war-obsessed, willing to sacrifice institutional integrity for personal relevance. He's advocating to make his own position, the only thing giving his life meaning, completely powerless, just to serve a reality television host who openly mocks him. The American people deserve better than senators who treat constitutional governance like a transaction at a golf course pro shop. We deserve representatives who understand that checks on power aren't partisan obstacles, they're the foundation of democracy itself. This isn't about liberal or conservative ideology. This is about whether we remain a republic with balanced powers, or descend into unchecked executive authoritarianism where one person decides when America goes to war. The 5 Republican senators who voted to preserve congressional war powers understood something Graham has forgotten: their oath is to the Constitution, not to any individual president's ego. We need to remain vigilant, call out this dangerous power grab for what it is, and demand our representatives actually represent us, not the military-industrial complex, not presidential vanity projects, but the American people who expect accountability and constitutional governance.